Hello, everyone, and welcome. Sorry for the delay. We had a few technical problems. That's because we're coming to you live from the historic Gay Street Theater in beautiful downtown Washington, Virginia. Welcome to the fourth in a monthly series of Meet the Artists events. I'm John Beardsley, and I'm an author and curator and educator and a longtime resident of Rappahannock County, and I will be your host tonight. These Meet the Artist events are held in conjunction with 6 monthly digital exhibitions of work by Rappahannock artists, all of which is sponsored by the Rappahannock Association for the Arts and the Community. The series of exhibitions presents work by county artists in 2- and 3-dimensional galleries online, and these exhibitions give you an opportunity to see the artist's work. Meet the Artists events like this one give you a chance to hear the artists talk about what motivates them and inspires them as artists, and gives you insights into how they work. This week, we'll be seeing the work of 6 artists: Martin Woodard, Michael Sage, Peter Cramer, Pam Pittenger, River District Potters, Sarah Adams and Nancy Nord, and Mary Allen. We've got about an hour for this event, and that gives us roughly 10 minutes per artist. So a quick update on Zoom user suggestions. First, keep your microphones muted, please, to reduce background noise. And second, set the view to speaker view. For those of you who are new to Zoom, you'll notice there are 2 ways to view a Zoom call: a speaker view and a gallery view. For those watching on computers, set your screen to speaker view, which is an icon located in the upper right corner of the screen. On mobile or tablet, mobile phone or tablet, set to show active speaker, which is located in the upper left corner. I might also note that as we're going through the exhibition, the image sizes of the works of art have been increased for viewing purposes. And you might want to check the information for each work to see what the actual size of the work is. Since we got a bit of a late start, we'll launch right in with Martin Woodard. Martin Woodard grew up in Herndon, Virginia, and has lived in Rappahannock County for over 45 years. He draws inspiration from the panorama of the Blue Ridge Mountains, as well as intimate details found along old back roads in the county. His oil paintings embrace shapes, colors, shadows, and compelling compositions to provide thoughtful interpretations of nature. Woodard's studio and gallery is located in a delightful old storefront on Main Street in Sperryville, quite near the coffee shop, where you can watch the comings and goings of local folks, business people, and tourists from the front porch and twin bay windows while he paints. Welcome, Martin, and thanks for being with us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Great. What is it that you hope the viewer will take away after seeing your work? What's the relationship you strive for between you and the work of art?
Obviously, I'm a landscape painter, and I have really sort of, I don't want to say nostalgic, but a romanticized view of what our lovely area is like. And I kind of liken it to, if probably most of us had the experience of being out of town for a few weeks, coming back late in the evening, when you crest that view right there by Massey's Corner and it opens up, you say, oh my God, that's why we're here. Well, that's kind of what I'm trying to express. It's like, oh my God, that's why I'm here. It's an area that I love. And I just try to let people know how I feel through the painting, and hopefully they appreciate it as well. That's pretty much what it's about.
So you're striving to make that connection between the landscape that you admire and feel at home in, and the viewer's experience of nature.
Well, yes, and a lot of these different paintings have little sub-stories that are meaningful to me. Because I've been around here for so long, there are views and images that just really resonate with me and appreciate it. And my hope is that it will resonate with people as well, maybe not because of that memory or that nostalgia, but because it really is an attractive representation of where we are.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite of the works in the exhibition? Tell us what you're trying to achieve with that painting, and maybe describe some of the techniques involved in making it.
The painting that I think I like the most is called Eat a Lot of Peaches. And that's probably the closest thing that I have to the result of this COVID epidemic in my work. I named it after a song by John Prine, who is one of the greatest singer-songwriters that this country's known, who died of the COVID-19 virus. And he wrote a song that's, the refrain in it says something like, blow up your TV, throw away your paper, go to the country, build you a house, plant you a garden, eat a lot of peaches. Try to find Jesus on your own. Well, finding Jesus on my own that's sort of metaphorical, but that's exactly what I did 45, 50 years ago when I came to Rappahannock County. And so this is a view of a winter landscape through the crotch of an old peach tree on our farm. And what I like about it is it's sort of like a photograph with a very shallow depth of field. The little crotch in the tree and the arms are very vivid and in focus, and everything else sort of falls to a random, out of focus background. And what I like is just the gesture of the forest in the distance, and the sky is just barely there. So the juxtaposition between the vividness of the foreground and the random sort of out of focus background is what I really like. And this is a technique. When you say what techniques that I use, it's more about the direction I'm trying to take my work is having more just gestures and random loose things and less really snappy stuff in the foreground. So this is kind of like a combination of the two.
You mentioned moving to Rappahannock 45 years ago. Have you been working as an artist the whole time, or when did you become an artist, and how did you become an artist?
Well, everyone's an artist. So, I became an artist when I was born, I guess. And a lot of folks maybe don't realize that, but everyone has within them some natural ability in some way to express themselves creatively. In the case of my art, it was just a question of trying to master techniques enough so that I could try to have it say something. And that's something that I do well, is just sort of work at stuff and noodle around in it, read a lot of books. I've taken a few classes. I'm mostly self-taught, but it has a lot to do with just trial and error and working on things. So I became an artist early on. I took some classes. I took some fine arts courses when I was at Vanderbilt University, mostly to pad my GPA. And I found out that, wow, I really like this. And so that was sort of the genesis, and it sort of percolated in the background for 35 years or so. And I got my life changed. I had a little more time. Felt like I needed to do something different. And so I picked up a paintbrush again and started just trying to work to have some mastery over the technique and be able to represent things. So that's kind of where it comes from.
Terrific. And well, then how do you decide what to paint, and how do you begin the painting?
I paint a lot of things that I just think look nice, but what the paintings that really I like the best are the ones like the one we described a minute ago. They eat a lot of peaches. I have a few other winter scenes, some old sunflowers that look like they're about to collapse. And those are landscape images that to me have a more sort of evocative feel to them. They're, I don't want to say it's emotional, but it allows the viewer to think a little bit outside the box about what's going on here. A landscape painting like this one that I see on my screen, I guess is Red Oak Mountain Road. I think that's a really lovely painting. I just like it, and it means a lot to me because where it is. But it isn't quite as, doesn't really kind of prick your interest as much about what's going on. And you say, yeah, that's really lovely. It's beautiful. I think you captured it nicely. But there's not that question, I wonder what he was thinking other than trying to do something nice.
Yeah.
So that's what I like to do. Those are the images that I like to try to portray. And it's not necessarily an easy thing to do. I mean, it takes a lot of trying to be aware of nature and see things in a different light. Just try to look at the landscape and say, no, what doesn't fit here? So that then you can see a little bit more closely things that are of interest like that. So that's what I like to do. And not all of the paintings are that. I also like to just try to make nice, attractive representations of where we live.
And are you welcoming people into your studio and gallery these days with COVID, or are you?
Well, no, but I have sort of big news, and that is I'm transitioning my gallery into it's going to be called Thornton River Art, and I'm going into partners with Patricia Brennan and Heidi Morf, who are two other artists. And, we're going to have a little collective gallery here. And hopefully it'll be up and running by mid-September, late September. We're just trying to feel our way right now.
Great. Well, congratulations. We'll look forward to that. Thanks so much for being with us and sharing your work.
Thank you.
Next up is Michael Sage. Michael isn't able to be with us tonight, but he sent the following narrative. Michael lives in a cottage on a secluded riverside farm called Farfaloo, where a Sage Gallery, his working teaching space, is located. This is the narrative he sent to us. Being primarily visually oriented at an early age, without a camera, I began taking pictures in my mind. Once, in my 20s, I was given a camera while on my way to go backpacking in Glacier National Park, Montana. On my first day there, a deer decided to enter my camp and lick my camera, knocking it off a stump and onto the ground. I shot a dozen rolls of film over the next couple of weeks, not realizing that the camera was broken, and only 2 pictures out of hundreds of frames were even recognizable. In my disappointment, I decided to continue just taking pictures with my mind. Finally, in 2005, at age 44, I bought a camera to document houses I was buying with a silent real estate partner. The digital camera allowed me to shoot limitless numbers of pictures, and my curiosity prompted me to start shooting all the time. It was like having a Polaroid instant camera with free film. Over the next 10 years, living on and off the road, mostly in the western and southern states, I explored wilderness locations and various out-of-the-way places, seeking inspiration for my photography. I came to Rappahannock County in 2015, and upon moving to an old winery in a bucolic setting, I felt the urge to begin painting. It's something I had promised myself to do whenever I had finally settled down. However, after years of chasing new horizons for elusive light to capture, my photographic style was taking a most satisfying shape. Instead of an easel and paints, I set up a digital darkroom and began reworking images with painterly approach. This allowed me to represent the feeling of a scene that the original photo often did not quite capture. I call this sage surreal. Being settled and having a home studio gallery has allowed me to add to my artistic experience the satisfaction of printing, matting, framing, and sharing my work. The image titled Reverie was my first attempt at sage surreal. The picture was taken from the window of my car while I was driving through the Shenandoah Valley on Interstate 81. Though the composition was pleasing, the image was too flat and dull as a photograph. Converting the picture with the freedom allowed to painters helped me to tell a story that alludes to layers of mood and history. This valley has held a lot of romance for me since my boyhood, and it gave me comfort to produce an image that was closer to my childhood memories. Photography can stop time, document a moment, and tell a story. Whether it's a simple snapshot or an artistically rendered composition, this is an art form that is easy to learn and yet very difficult to master. Photography for me has been a long, intense journey that continues to be worth every step. It's too bad Michael can't be with us here because it'd be really interesting to know how he achieves the painterly effects in the photograph, what kind of technical manipulation he's able to use to create these kinds of painterly effects. But you see it very clearly in this image of reflection, where the surface and the image are both distorted in a way that achieves a painterly effect. Next up is Peter Kramer. Is he available, or should we move on and come back to Peter?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Welcome, Peter. Thanks for being with us. Peter Kramer was born in a small New Jersey town about 30 miles outside of New York City. As a child, he began working with his father's hand tools, and then one day, his Sunday school teacher invited him to join him at his woodworking shop. This is where his first real taste for making something with wood began. Years later, Kramer started developing his skills in his brother-in-law's workshop, which led him to New York City and selling his furniture at Bloomingdale's. Kramer relocated to Rappahannock County in 1970, where he opened his own workshop and furniture store in Washington, Virginia. Kramer has an abiding love affair with wood, all types of wood. Even after so many decades, it continues to captivate and enthrall him. Designing and making furniture is his occupation, but more than that, it's his art form. So Peter, what do you find most satisfying as an artist, and what are your biggest challenges?
Biggest challenges are coming up with new concepts, new designs, but when they come, it's such a pleasure and brings so much joy to me that it's worth the struggle.
So it's actually imagining the piece or visualizing the piece that's the hardest step, not the fabrication, not the making of it?
For me, that's true. Now, I suppose a very skilled craftsman might look at the work sometime and think that they could have made it better. That's possible. But to me, it's the concept that's important. And we try really hard to bring it to its fullest.
And of your works in this exhibition, do you have a favorite? And tell us what you're trying to achieve with it, and maybe talk some about the techniques used to make it.
Right. The sideboard with the two females, or actually there are four female figures, happened in Missouri, the concept for it. I was at a museum there, and there was a statue, a little handmade statue that had that basic shape of the woman with her arms folded. And it reminded me of my mother and how she would fold her arms when she was about to demand something from me about behavior. And so I thought it was really great. And so that brought me to make the piece and call it Mother's Day Table. And that took me down a line where I made a number of pieces for holidays, and it was a great inspiration for me.
That's wonderful. And what are the materials in that piece?
Well, the mahogany and walnut, and actually the figures are pine that have been faux painted.
Mm-hmm. And did you made the figures yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So it's all your artistry.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So it sounds like you've been an artist most of your life. And what led you to become an artist?
Well, I had a dad who had some tools, and he encouraged me one day when he was forced to babysit me. Was back probably in the early 40s, and we had a polio epidemic at the time. So I was a Sunday morning, I couldn't go to Sunday school, and so my mom went to, she had something to do there, and my dad had to babysit me, and so he gave me a hammer and a couple other tools and sent me banging nails into a board. And that got me started, believe it or not. But the best thing that happened to me was a little later on in life, when I was probably 8 or 9, I had a Sunday school teacher who lived on the street behind me, and I walked over to his house one day and found that he had a woodworking shop in his garage. And I went in there to say hello, and he gave me a little project, a footstool project, and I made one, and I got very excited with it, and went home and I showed 2 of my friends, and we decided we were going to go into business of making the footstools, and we did. We made 3 of them, and then we went door to door selling, and we sold all 3 of them, one to each of our mothers.
That's great. Going off script a little bit here, there's a conventional and sometimes hierarchical division between art and craft, but even between fine arts and decorative arts. Is that a distinction meaningful to you, or is that irrelevant to your work?
Yeah, it's irrelevant. You know, if people want to see it as art, that's fine. If they want to see it as furniture, that's fine. Some people look at it from a functional standpoint only. Some look at it from the creative aspect. And you know, to me, it's a business, and I get the reward in making it much more so than actually having some reputation about it being art.
Mm-hmm. And so you're comfortable with however people view the work?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So clearly, these aren't exclusively functional items. They're also so clearly artistic objects.
Well, I do try to usually include a message, the message being whatever it was that put me down that road to get me to that thought or that design, what made it click. And so there is that process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably not so different than what an artist who's painting does. You know, they see a thing, they draw out of it what they get, and then they turn around and put it on a piece of canvas. And that's probably what I'm doing with wood.
And so, and what's your favorite aspect of being an artist?
Not working 9 to 5 or something like that, but working all kinds of hours, getting up in the midnight because some idea popped into your head, and getting into the shop and working. And then the next day, instead of having an 8-hour day, deciding you're only going to work an hour and spend the rest of the day out enjoying gardening or something. So there's a freedom with it that's hard to really measure.
That's great. Well, and also you described taking so much pleasure in the sort of imaginative act, the sort of having the idea in the first instance.
That's the big kick for me.
Yeah, that's terrific. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being with us. And
Well, thank you for having us. That's great.
you're so welcome. Our next artist is Pam Pittenger. Pam is also not able to be with us this evening and sent the following narrative about her work and her inspiration. She writes, I moved to Rappahannock County in 2003. I came to visit my sister and ended up loving the area so much, my husband and I moved to Amosville. I had no idea at the time that Rappahannock had such a vibrant art community, which seems to get better and more diverse every year. Not only are there lots of artists living here, but there are so many wonderful people who support the arts. RAC has worked tirelessly for the art community and for tourism, putting together the annual Artists Tour, a monumental task when many artists open their studios to visitors. We have a 100-year-old barn that we have renovated. My husband, Lynn, has his workshop, his wood shop and furniture on display in the ground floor, and my studio is on the floor above him. I am an abstract painter, primarily working with acrylic paint and mixed media. People often ask how an abstract work gets started. There is no subject in mind at the beginning. I take a black crayon and just start scribbling all over the canvas. When satisfied with that, I start adding paint. Mostly brushes are used, but I like to experiment with other things too. A favorite is a silicone basting brush that comes from the kitchen drawer. Feathers also work well, and the geese on our pond provide an everlasting supply. Bubble wrap is great for adding a grid of dots. Basically, anything that gives greater interest gets used. Drawing into the work to add lines helps to activate the canvas and give it more depth. I stop frequently to just look at the canvas to assess how it's going and where more work is needed. I like to paint fast, which keeps me from getting too tight and controlling. But the painting usually takes a long time to be finished. There's all the time in between working when I'm studying the canvas, and sometimes the canvas is put away, sometimes for years, before it is finished. Every once in a blue moon, my muse takes over and the painting seems to get done intuitively. I live for those effortless moments, as I'm sure all artists do. My goal is to add as much depth to the work as possible. Glazes partially hide what's come before, and then more line is added, then more opaque paint, building up layer upon layer of the painting. Sometimes there is a section of the canvas that is wonderful, but the rest of it still needs more work. This is a paralyzing time because I don't want to ruin the parts I do like. Eventually, I have to bite the bullet and go into the painting with a vengeance. Sometimes the precious parts get covered over, but the work doesn't suffer. In fact, it's often improved at that point. And so it's a dance of working, assessing, and working more until finally the work is complete. How do I know it's done? That's a bit of a mystery. I guess because there seems to be nothing more that could be added or taken away, and that the work feels alive. It makes me feel content. My work has changed since moving into my new studio. I used to make somewhat humorous work inhabited with quirky characters while still being abstract. Now, in the new space, there are very large windows looking out on the rolling hills, forest, and the pond. It wasn't intentional, but it became very apparent that my paintings took on the look of landscape while still remaining abstract. Lately, I've been exploring ways to meld these two ideas into one canvas." End quote. Pam was formerly a member of the Middle Street Gallery for many years and was also part of the six-pack that showed together in Little Washington. She has also shown at the River Gallery and last year had a show at the Gay Street Gallery in Washington, Virginia. All right. Next up are the River District potters. 4 potters, Sarah Adams, Susan Hornbostel, Doris Jones, and Nancy Nord, joyfully create functional and artful ceramics at River District Potters in Sperryville. Artists Sarah Adams and Nancy Nord are with us today and featured in this month's virtual exhibitions. Sarah Adams creates earthenware and stoneware pottery by hand building. She loves to feel the clay take shape from her hands. She glows with satisfaction when someone says they want to live with one of her creations. Adams worked at Glen Echo Pottery and learned how to throw pots on the wheel from Susan Jacobs at Eastern Market Pottery in Washington, D.C., along with many workshops with local and regional potters. Nancy Nord currently creates both wheel-thrown and hand-built pottery. She loves to paint on her pots and uses the clay as a canvas for fruits, vegetables, herbs, and the other culinary treats that the pots may eventually hold. She's worked at Glen Echo Pottery and studied at Penland School of Craft and with several local potters. We'll start with Sarah Adams first. Sarah, what do you find most satisfying as an artist, and what are your biggest challenges?
Well, I find the most satisfying part is to produce something. I really like to finish and produce a product. So the process is, fairly defined. It's a 3-step process, but the biggest challenge is after you've gotten through and produced a number of pieces of work, then you say, well, what am I going to do next? So that's the big question. What am I going to do next? But I've done a lot of varieties of hand building. You'll see I love to texture clay. This particular piece, I've layered a lot of glazes. So it's a flowing bowl because it was a slab of clay that I then slumped into a vessel just to give it some form. And then when the glazes were put on it, I was able to allow all these glazes to run together, and you'll see they pull color out of each other, which we just have a lot of fun with the surprise of what's going to come out, because you don't always know how the glazes are going to interact with each other.
What kind of clays do you use, and what kind of glazes?
We mostly do stoneware. We also do some earthenware, but I think lately we've been all 4 of us have been using stoneware. And the glazes that we use, we've had some are bucket glazes that we dip, but we're mostly using some commercial glazes that are layered, so you can put them together. And for example, the folded bowl has all those layers in it. Mm-hmm. On the right, the shells have the glaze itself just falls over the texture and creates a different color scheme just from the one glaze. That glaze is called blue rutile. And, I've always said we never do anything twice. However, these shells are so popular that every once in a while I have to make some more of them because somebody has bought them all. But everyone is different because I mold it on a real scallop shell. And so, it goes into the folds of the scallop shell a little bit different every time I do it. And then the glaze itself adheres differently. I may put it on a little thicker than the last time. So you can see one's got a little more brown than the blue. So, but they're all surprised. But for some reason, that particular shape and form creates a memory for some people. They'll say, oh, I grew up at the seashore, and oh, I want to serve scallops in this. So that is one thing that I do more of than anything else. The rest are onesies.
Mm-hmm. Do you work at different sizes, or most of your work sort of the size that are comfortable in your hands?
Well, I go from loving to do very, very small things, and I love to do little pinch pot bowls, and then create stacks of them, and then long things. And right now, I'm building some big cylinder vases because I like to build things that are functional, that when somebody says, what do you do with that? There's an answer.
Mm-hmm.
I love flowers. So a lot of my things would hold things like flowers, whether they're fresh flowers or dried flowers, or your utensils in your kitchen, but that, they're that kind of a vessel. But so I work in all sizes. And now you can see we've started creating sets of things where the tray has a little bitty bowl to go with it, sort of let people, make collections of things.
Mm-hmm. And what's the relationship you strive for between your work and the viewer?
Well, I love to have someone say, I would like to live with this. Mm-hmm. And so that reaction, and also we encourage people to come in and pick things up and feel them, because oftentimes you can feel our fingerprints in the clay. Mm-hmm. And so it's a tactile experience. So they're relating both to the shape, perhaps how they might use it, or they're relating to just how it feels to them. And that's what they warm up to. And we also tell people, everybody's trying to get rid of stuff these days. So they're not necessarily buying things for themselves, but so we encourage them to think of us when they have to take a housewarming present or they're doing their holiday shopping, to mm-hmm. come and take a piece of pottery. And that always makes us happy when we see somebody doing that.
Right, great. Well, thank you, Sarah. Nancy, what other artists have influenced you and your work over the years?
Well, I took up pottery, John, when a number of years ago, as an antidote to what I was doing from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Mm-hmm. And indeed, at one point about 10, 12, 15 years ago, I was in a rather high-profile, high-stress position. And every Sunday morning, I would go down and throw pots with Suzanne Zylonis down at Sperryville Pottery. Mm-hmm. And that was an experience which was just very impactful for me. In order to throw a pot, you have to clear your mind. You have to put away extraneous thoughts. You really have to focus on what you're doing. You have to be centered in order to center a pot. And so that experience with Suzanne was really, really what got me started. Subsequent to that, I took some classes with Jeannie Drevis, who we all know and love. Mm-hmm. And indeed, that's where I met Sarah and Doris and Susan. We all were in the same class together, and we decided that we should continue the foursome. And hence, that's how River District Potters came about. I love Kat Habib's work. I think everything she makes is beautiful, but it is a very different aesthetic, as you can see from what I do. And also, Sarah Schneidman, I'm sorry, Sarah, I do know your name, has been a big impact on me as well. She makes just wildly colorful things, but they are just light as a feather. And every time I throw a pot and then sit down to trim the excess clay off it, I always think of Sarah and how she can get those pots to be just so substantial, but just such light, airy, wonderful vessels. So she's been a big influence too. But there are so many wonderful, wonderful ceramic artists here in Rappahannock County, and they've all touched me in some way.
Terrific. And how has your practice as a ceramic artist changed over time?
Well, I like functional things, as Sarah said. I'm at an age where I'm trying to get rid of stuff, and I don't want things that have no use. If it's just decorative or if it's just sculptural, I'm not going to make it because I wouldn't want it in my house, so I'm not going to make it. So everything I make is functional. mostly the things I make are very highly decorated. You can see there's two bowls coming across the screen now with a black background. And that is very typical of the work I do. I love to paint on the clay. The clay is the canvas. And also there is a lot of carving and other surface treatments, which you can't really see in those photographs, but are there. And so that is what I started out doing, and it's what I keep coming back to. Some of the other things that you see have been made when I take a breather from the more highly decorated pots. They're much quieter, but nevertheless, I always keep coming back to painting the pots and doing a lot of surface decoration.
Mm-hmm. Well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing your work with us.
Well, thank you for having us.
And we'll hope to catch the rest of the River District Potters another time. Thank you.
Come to the studio.
Yeah. Are you welcoming visitors with masks?
We are welcoming visitors with masks. In fact, we encourage people to come down and watch us play in mud and, as Sarah said, handle the pots. We like to see the fingers of the potters on our work. So if it's perfect, it came from Pottery Barn. It's one of a kind here.
Terrific. Last up is Mary Allen. Mary Allen grew up in a home surrounded by professional musicians, potters, and painters, and has been an artist all her life. Every day was a creative day. She thrived on the energy among her family. She sees compositions in all aspects of life, from the chaos of dishes in her kitchen sink to the flower arrangements she creates from her gardens. She takes joy in shadows cast across the country roads and sparkles on the cut crystal of the vase by the window. Originally an oil painter, Mary switched to watercolor because she loves the fresh, bright colors that can only capture with that medium and the way the water paints run and blend in a way that oils can never do. The surprising results delight her as she developed her paintings of ordinary situations in still life and landscape. Mary paints every day to try and capture yet one more piece of life this beautiful world has offered her. Mary, how do you decide what to paint, and how do you begin a painting?
Well, thank you, John, for having me tonight. And I choose my subjects according to what's going on around me. And I often am participating in a show that has a theme, and I paint to the theme. I usually paint in groups of paintings. I paint a body of work so that there's always a collection of certain things. And in this case, I am usually a very realistic watercolorist. And that's from my background as a medical artist, where I used to go into the OR and paint and illustrate things for pharmaceutical companies and medical schools and that type of thing. So I'm very detail oriented. So it depends on what the project is that dictates what I paint.
Mm-hmm. So is the work in this exhibition part of a series or specific collection? And is there a story behind what you've included? If
yes,
it's a series, what inspired you?
The black and white paintings that you see are part of a big exhibit that I did for the Culpeper Historic Museum. They did a tribute to the Virginia Lace Makers Guild earlier this year. Mm-hmm. And they brought in the Piedmont Lace Guild, and all their exhibitions were about lace making. And they had classes and whatever. And they knew, because of another series that I had done, which included windows with lace curtains so that you saw the backgrounds through the lace, that I was a lace painter. And so they invited me to do a show to celebrate what the lace makers were doing. And these are pieces of little vintage baby dresses and things that they had in their collection. And these are just a few, but I chose particular parts of each of those to put together. And then in the center of this thing, I had a painting of a rack of black and white children's clothes that showed the full dresses. And that was part of the central exhibit. And then all the lace makers were surrounding this. So it's a really fun exhibit and a challenge because it was all monochromatic, no color, all black and white. And we were very happy with the results. It was really fun to do.
And all done in watercolor? Because
it's all watercolor.
Such a challenge to depict lace in watercolor.
Yes, it is. But that's part of that detail that I really love to do. I sort of get into a Zen feeling when I'm working in detail, and I've just taken to another place. I love working that way.
And are the more colorful works in the exhibition also part of a series?
They are part of a series. I decided this past fall and winter that everybody has known me as such a realistic painter. And I decided that I needed to show people and just to prove to myself that I could do it, that I really had a lot of whimsy to me. And I've always loved Klimt, the painter. Mm-hmm. And of course, I love all these wonderful colors and metallics and things. So I started creating this series of my own interpretation of Klimt and what I would do if I could paint like him. And I had started this whole series. This little piece here is actually a little tiny study. It's only a little, 6x6 piece. The other two are much larger pieces that I then developed from some of the studies that I was doing. And I was having so much fun, and I couldn't wait. And there was a show coming up, and I was going to have this whole wonderful, fun and funky, whimsical Klimt series. And then the COVID virus hit, and I got it.
Oh,
and
no.
My husband did, and we were both knocked out, and we were very sick for a couple of months. And so this was only the beginning of a new series that I was getting ready to do. And I can't wait to get back to it and finish it up and hopefully have a show in Rappahannock at the gallery with all of these things.
Well, I hope you're fully recovered and feeling better.
Oh, I'm feeling great. Absolutely. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but yeah, we're the lucky ones.
Yeah. And these paintings are also all watercolor?
Yes.
Oh, amazing.
They're all watercolor. I love watercolor. I used to be an oil painter, and the turpentine started giving me headaches when I was working in my studio. Then when I went to graduate school, after art school, I went for my master's in medical illustration, and we worked only in water-based paints. And so, excuse me, I decided to completely switch to water-based paints, and all the things I did as a medical illustrator were in watercolor, airbrush and watercolor. Mm-hmm. And I never looked back. I think some of the saturated color that I use as a watercolorist comes from my oil painting background, because I tend to do tight and very saturated colors. Mm-hmm. A little different than the typical watercolorist. Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you've been an artist your whole life. Where did you go to art school?
Well, I went to art school at Sophie Newcomb Art School of Tulane University in New Orleans. Uh-huh. And then I did my graduate work at the Medical University of Georgia, where I worked with one of the original medical illustrators that worked with Frank Netter, and we worked there. And then I went to Boston, and I was a medical illustrator for Tufts Medical School and Harvard Medical School, and actually worked for the Children's Television Workshop with Big Bird and all of Sesame Street. We developed a healthcare program for children, and I helped do the production work for that.
Oh, terrific. And how long have you been in Rappahannock then?
I've been here, actually I live in Culpeper, and I've been here for about 30 years, but my gallery and studio are in Rappahannock, and it's called Gallery 3, and it's right there next to the schoolhouse in Sperryville, and I'm right behind the Cottage Curator Gallery, so you can find me there. We're closed to the general public until September, but we'll be open again for the gallery.
Great. Well, terrific. I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Mary, for being part of this as well.
Thank you.
Just in closing, let me remind everyone that you can visit the exhibitions again at your leisure, both the two-dimensional and three-dimensional versions of the exhibitions. They'll be up for the coming month. All work in the exhibitions is available for purchase directly from the artist. If you're interested in looking closely at things, you can enter detail view by clicking directly on an image, and that gives you a closer view of the work, and you can get detailed information by clicking on the eye on the right-hand side of the screen when you're in detail view. There you go. Contact information for each artist is provided on the information on each work, should you have questions or wish to inquire about any work. This is also available when you're in detail view. I want to thank RAC for hosting the virtual art exhibitions, and remind you that they're monthly through October. And I want to thank the artists who participated this month. And I want to thank Dick and Nancy Rains for making the theater available to us for this Zoom production. So we'll see you all in another month for another one of these virtual exhibitions. And until then, enjoy this one. Thank you so much to all our artists for being with us, and thank you to all the people who participated by listening and watching.